He's so cute.
It's going already.
Are we recording?
Yeah, but still let it out anything before he.
Yeah, tell Caleb.
He edits out all of our swear words.
Does he really? I'm disappointed in Caleb. I have to talk to him.
Except for all the ones that Frank uses.
I think it is one says,
I said he edits out all the swear words except for the ones that you use.
Oh,
That you never use.
Yeah.
Right? Oh dear.
well, I use them once in a while with our new puppy.
Can you believe he's got a new puppy?
How old is the puppy?
5 months.
Oh, bless you. What is wrong with you?
That's what I said too.
And this
What
from a
is
dog
it about
person.
saying that?
No, but my friends, their dog is not doing well. He's about 10 or 11 years old, and he's a boxer, and he's in kidney failure. And their daughter-in-law found this little Chihuahua Pomeranian.
You got
Oh shoot, that's my
30
oil.
seconds.
It's my oil guy.
Oh, good, all right.
Hi, John. Okay, thank you.
All right, let's call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. It's a rainy night. Glad to see everybody. We have one more meeting for this meeting and perhaps one more before we close out the fiscal year, I'm sure. The minutes, I did not, there's 2 minutes to be approved. And I've only included one set, which is page 2. Oh no, I guess I did vote. Okay, I did copy it all. All this, these minutes were the ones where we voted on all of the articles in preparation. And the only additional thing in the minutes was the second item, which was the transfer request. But otherwise, it's just the recording of all the articles and our votes. So, if we have a motion to approve those minutes, I'm glad to accept it. Linda, thank you. And second. Any discussion or comments on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There's a vote. Okay, on to page 8. That would be the minutes of the April 3rd meeting, short meeting. Well, it wasn't all that short, but we mostly had a discussion basically on town meeting presentation and the plan and all that good stuff. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Erica, is there a second?
Second?
Comments, questions, discussion, errors or omissions, or any of that? All in favor? Okay. Next item is a request for a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $10,000. This request is to address the cleanup of town property on Fruit Street as a result of illegal dumping.
Where's Fruit Street?
Fruit Street
Runs
runs
by-
parallel with 95, it's sort of out behind Pearson Plaza. Right?
Yeah,
Is that the
it
best
goes
way?
down, it goes parallel with 95. You know how if you go into Pearson Plaza and you keep going straight? That's Fruit Street. Our address is actually Fruit Street.
So is it really badly?
I don't
Yes.
know.
Well, yes,
yes.
I can show
You
you,
got the pictures?
I have some pictures.
Where?
And it is,
I don't know if
what
it's-
I didn't realize is town property.
And we have an audit correct from the Board of
And we
Health.
have an order from the Board of Health to make corrections.
Steve's being picky, huh?
Well, you know what? I don't
Oh,
think,
where is it?
All those
All
times.
the tires? It's landlocked.
it's landlocked.
Oh, 'cause,
This is where it is. That, it's landlocked. And
oh,
here, this is Fruit Street.
yeah.
And if you're, and Central Street would be out here. And it's landlocked. And this is one picture.
Oh my God,
And this is another.
that's
So-
horrible.
And it's somewhat, I don't know if it's isolated or whether there's trees that, but it's clearly
Wow.
an issue, and I think the police have begun to
There's an
investigate.
investigation which,
Going on.
and then town council will be, once everything's, that they'll be, once we clean up and get the bill and everything, town council will prepare a document to send to the person responsible, and hopefully we'll get restitution.
Okay. But it really needs to be cleaned up.
That's
You wanna see them?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's the three of them. I'll pass
Is this
those.
something that's happened relatively recently?
It looks like an accumulation over time,
Over time,
Oh,
yeah, it's definitely over
okay,
time.
now I know where that is.
but it seems to be hidden. I mean,
It is.
somewhat.
Is
It's-
it primary just tires?
No,
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 rock
it's
debris
a
and everything.
lot of other debris too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tires,
Yeah, you
obviously.
can't, you almost can't
Problem.
see that going down Food
You
Street.
can't.
You can't.
I scanned it on, what do you call it? Something.
Satellite.
Satellite, yeah, and I could see it pretty clearly, but it was in the middle of, and I don't know why the town owns that piece of property, but we do.
It might have been taken because of unpaid taxes.
Oh,
That's it,
Years
it's
and
a
years ago.
foreclosure.
Oh,
Yeah.
somewhere along the line.
Because those are all pretty much family-owned
Yeah.
properties in that, on that street.
Now,
Yeah.
you say, why did it jump to do, why don't we wait till we find out who was responsible and force them to do it?
Because we,
Because the Board of Health ordered us to.
yeah,
I mean, they may order us, but why can't we wait? It's been there. I don't
That's
see,
not my
I
decision,
don't,
I can't tell you why.
I don't see,
there's other problems besides just the tires, like little animals.
well, I mean, I
I
understand that
can't believe there'd be little
it's been,
animals
it's
on
been
Food
there that
Street.
way for a period of time.
Somebody's been dumping tires.
That one.
You have to believe that.
No, I understand that, you know, but I would
It's not somebody
say,
got rid of the Jason tires on their car and just,
no, I understand that,
Somebody's-
you know,
Let me
obviously.
read, you want me to read the letter?
I would.
I can read the
Wow.
letter. Based on the results of, this is inspection, the Board of Health finds that the property may endanger or materially impair the health or safety and well-being of the abutters. I'm guessing there may have been a concern raised by others. If not, it's something they found out anyway.
I would agree.
Conditions,
But it's
Someone was-
town
this property was
property, it's
there.
town property that this is happening?
yes,
Mhm.
yes,
Jesus.
That's awful.
yeah.
I don't understand that.
Garbage or mixed garbage and rubbish is apparently part of the issues. Tires, you know, it's violating, you
That's a
know,
major fire
state-
hazard as well.
State sanitary code.
You know, you think about it,
There's
you
no
know, homes for
argument,
critters.
there's no argument that
Yeah.
needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah,
The
Sick
question is
critters.
that, are we jumping the gun by means of, is there now an investigation, the police department are going, and they're going to put together and bill somebody for this? What is the, do we have, is there an, I mean, I'm not necessarily, let's do it, but I mean, I think it's kind of, all of a sudden, bang. When did they find this out? How long have they
this
known about it?
order to correct is dated April 24th.
Which just recently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Matt.
following the last time we had to do this, when it involved Mantor Field, we had to pay for the cleanup out of reserve and get reimbursement from the people who did the illegal dumping.
Right.
That was a Manta dumping on the road. Seems, that was
Yeah.
a Manta dump, his trucks dumped some material that wasn't supposed to be dumped for
Right.
road work. This seems to be a little bit different, it's the accumulation of tires over time. This isn't happening yesterday. This has been a long time in the making, you know?
It
And I,
seems a liability though.
Yeah, maybe it
Kid runs in there,
affected
cuts his
someone's
leg on
health.
something rusty.
It's on our
I mean-
property too, like that's the thing, it's
I-
our
We're
property, we're
aware of
responsible.
this. There's
We're
there's a
aware.
liability.
There's a
I think-
liability
I
not to
think
take
you're-
care of
I think you're right,
I think if
once you're,
if
once you're
someone gets
aware,
hurt,
yeah.
we know about it.
all right,
We'll be responsible.
failure to comply with any provisions of 105 CMR 410-600 which results in any accumulation of garbage, rubbish, filth, or other causes of sickness which may provide a food source or harborage for rodents, insects, or other pests, or otherwise contribute to accidents or to the creation or spread of disease may be subject to fines ranging from $15 to $500. Each day's failure to comply with an order shall constitute a separate violation.
fine from whom, to whom?
Board of Health.
Board
From
of
the
Health.
Board of Health.
But to
To
who?
the town, probably, because the
Board
town
of
owns
Health's
the
gonna-
property.
Our own Board of Health's gonna find our own town?
It's the law.
Mhm.
That's all I'm gonna do. I'm
They
just
condemned
reading
our
the
own
law.
building. We've been
I
through
mean,
this before.
However, let me just say something. whether we're able to get reimbursement for this cost or not, if we don't get it, we're still gonna have to do it.
Right.
So why not do it and get it done
And
with?
if you
Do
think
it-
about the way
do
the
it
math
quicker.
goes on this, if I'm
Yeah.
right,
Why
this
having
comes
this-
out of reserve
why
fund,
having
anything
this
that
mess?
sits in reserve fund
Right.
after the 30th goes into free cash.
Yeah,
Right.
If we pay it out this year, it comes in into the next fiscal year, it's now a fine that's been paid that comes in and then it's not an accrued expense, it ends up in free cash.
Who's gonna do the work?
that's not my,
I believe there's an estimate, James had an estimate. Right, I think the DPW is gonna be doing the work, but we have disposal costs because of the tires or hazardous waste.
that's the biggest,
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest.
Yeah.
So it's our employees gonna do the work and pay for the disposal fees concurrent to cleaning it up? Okay. It's not an outside contractor that's doing it. Disposal fees, they usually pay somebody.
It's on Fruit Street.
I mean, he has, I don't know where he's bringing them, but I think that the cost is basically to,
Get
Get rid of the
I
tires.
think, is the biggest issue.
That's awful.
One, you know, since there's a little bit of surprise is that, is there other town, are we taking a look at any and all other town-owned properties to make sure that no one else is dumping illegally on our properties?
I can't answer that.
I would think that part of possible approve this would be the caveat that we do get a list of town-owned properties and make sure at least somebody takes a look, see, and there's no other tires nowhere else.
You gotta win something out of it somewhere.
You know, it's nice, because on
Do we need to
on
add
the
that
building,
transfer
at
request in
Thursday
our
Hall,
office
we
survey?
have cameras.
Do we have a motion, by the way? I didn't
I'll
ask
make,
for
I'll make a motion. We
Is
have,
there a
ca-
second?
A second.
Okay.
we have
No,
cameras,
discuss more.
and on more than one occasion, the police have called us and said, hey, do you have video on this day or this evening? You know, we need to see if we can find cars going down Fruit Street or going out behind the back of the building, and, because people do things that they really shouldn't do, or, you know, so, unfortunately, people are dumb today, because every building has cameras on it, and.
So obviously this one didn't have any cameras.
No, but going down the road, if they saw somebody with a truck full of tires, they might be able to figure out who.
I think it's
whose
about
truck it is.
17, it's not a half an acre, but it's 17,000 square feet, I think, that piece of property in there.
Oh,
Yeah, about a third, yeah.
and it's filled with trash.
We took it through foreclosure.
but that's my understanding, yeah. Mhm.
So, anyway, ready for the vote? All those, oh, wait a minute.
What?
Were you making an addendum to the motion?
No.
Okay. Alright. Just checking. But your point is well taken. Alright, all those in favor of the transfer?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? There's a vote. Alright. We're gonna be colorful for the next couple of meetings. Okay, moving on. It's timeout.
What?
Did everybody vote yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
2, 4, 6, 7, okay, so, I think
Yes,
if we do
yes,
this, 0, 0, we don't do this now,
You'll never remember her.
and you want it.
Yes, please. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
And the next sheet simply is, what's left, from, in our reserve balance. 42 out and 10 out, so we're down to 98,000, that's all that is.
Did we already vote on the police cell phone system?
That was
Yeah.
done back in November.
November.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Okay, page 11. We need some information on these, at least I do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are end of year transfers, requests from one budget line to another. Typically, we get these in the last meeting or two of the year to make sure any account that needs money gets it if it's possible. Eileen,
Yes.
help us out here. Tax title foreclosures.
That's where the money's coming from.
Right, how much, how
It has
much is there in that account?
like 25.
25,000, okay. All right, and shellfish expense, they're looking for 400, and administration and finance is looking for some money.
Yes, ma'am.
That's you?
I can't believe that.
I know the Essex Regional Retirement Assessment, we have balance in there because we paid it early. So there's 2,500 going to Medicare expense. And then insurance is going to public building utilities. I'm assuming that there's a balance and that account makes that available. And public building is, utilities must mean our utilities were up more than we anticipated, which is
Yeah.
understandable. The last one is a transfer within the enterprise account. Salary and wages to expenses. Can you elaborate at all on that?
Yes, I can.
Good.
So, we hadn't really talked about today, when I was paying bills and stuff, I noticed they were definitely close to being kind of at the end of their rope on the expense account. So I did some analysis, and I did a conservative estimate out through the end of the fiscal year for the ambulance services. And there's sufficient amount to transfer from that account into the expenditure account. And I think that in looking at saying, okay, where, you know, why, whatever, they're up on their runs, and they're obviously their wages are definitely being maintained within the you know, the as like the same as last year. They're pretty much running the same.
Right.
But I think like a lot of like the supplies to the ambulance, they've had a couple of things pop up this year that they had to deal with as far as maintenance, you know, fixing a couple of the vans and stuff like that. So I mean, nothing really out of the ordinary, but they need to make it to the end of the year. They don't have anything left.
Okay. Is it
I was told that they have a reserve account in that department, is that correct?
They have retained earnings currently, which is from previous year operations, and they also have we have an extraordinary and unforeseen account. That would be like a reserve fund transfer. But this kind of, I mean, we don't really need to utilize that because we have the funds. We have them available within the departmental line items to make the transfer. But the extraordinary and unforeseen, I mean, obviously, the things that are really extraordinary and unforeseen and not necessarily.
But when they made the presentation at the town meeting, there was some additional line items that we never really had discussed. There was expenses, I understand, for supplies and things. Then there was another expense account that they listed in the town meeting presentation. From the ambulance, the whole, and they never listed the fact that they retained earnings account.
You don't do that. That's a balance sheet item.
Yeah, but then again, you know, the fact of the matter is it may be a balance sheet item, but it'd be good for us to know, because we're looking at sustaining ambulance services going forward, and how much are we making, how much are we costing us, and how much are we basically holding on to? And rather than just say, well, it's an enterprise account, it's been running close to 3 years now, right?
I do believe, yes.
And the law of setting up an enterprise account is after 3 years, you have to decide whether you want to continue it as an enterprise account or move it over into a regular fire department account or a town account. At which time, you know, then the monies that are generated there can be used for other things than just the ambulance, as I understand it. Up to this point in time, an enterprise can only use, money can only be used for the ambulance services. After you sunset the enterprise account, and it can be used for other things. You know, maybe like equipment for the fire department, because we're looking at a big equipment budget. I think it should be wise for us to have a presentation 3 years in the running, this, and I guess the design, correct me if I'm wrong, with the enterprise account, it was essentially to prove to town voters that this is a viable enterprise, rather than bundling the money all into multiple accounts, and then saying, after 3 years of service, you'd have to somebody get up and say, you know, guys, we've been running this 3 years, we've had so many runs, we're making $260,000 per year on this, and, you know, and we're keeping our nose up above water, and it looks like we want to retain this going forward. And I think and then it gets into the issue of, to my biggest concern, is employee expenses. Because, you know, how many people, and are we factoring retirement? Now, I understand there are only 20 hours, supposedly, there's a number of people working just 20 hours in that.
Well, that's in fact what it is, because otherwise they would be paying
Right.
Right, but I'm saying is that how long is that going to be?
going forward.
Yeah, is it going to, at some point in time, we say, we need full-time guys, we can't do this with part-time. And, and maybe that's the wisest thing, but then somebody should say, what's the pro forma if we convert an individual who's 20 hours per week, and he's getting paid say $20 an hour, I don't know what he gets paid. But at some point in time, if we were gonna make that guy full-time, what the cost of the town would be for that individual. Because there's a lot of people, must be doing this. No? There aren't that many people? How many hours a day did they offer?
They basically, there's the 2 full-time employees that are joint fire and ambulance, depending,
During the day?
during the day. And then they have shift coverage, which they do, and they keep everybody on the part-time basis. I'm not exactly sure what they cover. Their payroll probably runs about $2,000 on a bi-weekly pay period. So again, I'd have to
I'm not
really do
saying
the
that,
analysis.
that's fine, but I'm saying, up to this point in time, is there gonna be a decision to internalize this, to continue it as, for a long period of
Are
time?
you suggesting then, by way of a motion, that at the conclusion of the 3-year period, we take a look at the viability of this going forward?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Is that a motion?
I would be a suggestion, I don't know.
Or a suggestion?
I just think that, I think it's a good service, fine, but, it's been put in, and it's 3 years in the running. When I first questioned, I was told, like, let it go for a couple of years, see what experiences we've had. We've had 3 years of experience, and.
We will have, right?
We will have.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, this is-
At a minimum,
I think this is the third.
yeah.
And I think the law, the enterprise account calls for a 3-year
Yeah.
exclusivity for the
Continuation.
separation of the funds. And whether or not, and so now we're seeing they've got a reserve account, their expenses, and also the key is reimbursement. I know that, how many runs they're making, I don't know how much per run or what a run equal, what they collected a run or not.
It all depends.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, you could say,
Could be an hour, it could be 3 hours.
Yeah.
how much per hour? I don't know,
I don't know.
is it $2,000 to take somebody to the
It all, again, we're restricted under Medicare, and Medicaid, we can only charge, we can only bill, we can bill whatever, but there's an allowance that we have to accept because
Yeah.
we take Medicare. Same with all the other services, Blue Cross Blue Shield has a rate that they allow
Right.
you, and they all have different rates, and then
So I
there's
will
the
make a
allowable.
note.
And also-
You're suggesting that we do this in the fall?
Yeah, and also I think the other thing which I'd like to have you discuss and revisit is this balanced billing piece. At some point in time, was a suggestion made and never followed up on, that if the individual doesn't cover the entire bill from the insurance, is the town of Newbury going to bill them for the leftover?
Do they still use Comstock?
They do the.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this balanced billing thing, for
They're using
example,
it,
needs to be
yes.
part of that, is if and when that decision is reached, because a couple of things occur. One is the town of Newbury, as an enterprise account, a town, can charge interest on the non-paid amount. And the interest level can be what?
I don't do the billing, I'm
Interest level
not
can be-
familiar, yeah.
To be 12 to 14, 15%, because it's not governed by interest rates, it's what the state said. And, if the town elects to use that. And then the other thing is that there was some discussion that, at that point in time, they would, if the person didn't pay, they would basically attach their property.
That was not from any official.
No, but it was a discussion in motion, and some people voiced the fact that some other towns do it that way.
Okay.
I mean, I understand it wasn't happening, but I heard that, some other town, they bill this way. And it's okay if that's the way, but, let's not fall into, and all of a sudden, by the way, we're doing this, and it's a, quote, financial enterprise, hey, it gets a little dicey.
I think from my understanding, having the last time we had this discussion, you can answer this probably better than anyone. The offset costs, the costs for
Indirect costs?
indirect costs
Mhm.
are pretty much squared away.
Yeah, I've been
So-
working very, very good, and I think Doug got us down for that, yep.
That includes things like
Health
health
insurance,
insurance,
Medicare.
Medicare.
I bill them direct for their
Yeah.
Medicare expense,
So
which
you
isn't
charge an
much.
administrative fee at all?
For what? I charge me.
Yeah.
I charge, I bundled
Yeah.
everybody's hours,
Okay.
and I charge the
A
portion
percentage,
of my health
So,
insurance, anything
Cause
that's
that
in my
gives us a
hours.
clearer picture too of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, you look around and, you see the surrounding towns do not have ambulance services, they do it differently. Raleigh has no ambulance service, and, Newburyport doesn't have an ambulance service. And I don't know whether the closest one is.
This seems to be working right now.
Georgetown has their
We'll
own
take a look.
ambulance service.
Yeah.
Well, most of them will, if they
Five
outsource,
thousand.
then Cataldo would probably, Cataldo or Atlantic,
Talbot and Atlantic.
they typically take the runs. Matter of fact, that's who does our,
Okay, any more discussion? Ready for the vote? Did get a motion?
I don't believe we did.
No,
Oh,
do not.
we need a motion.
we
What
need,
are
are
we
we gonna go one by
voting on,
one
all
or?
all these
The
transfers?
Well-
transfers,
I think, yeah, it's all one,
the year-end budget transfers.
unless
Yeah.
there's an exception.
Okay.
Somebody want, otherwise we'll take them the entire amount.
Move to-
Move
Move
to
to
approve the
approve
year-end,
the-
motion to approve the year-end
Second.
transfer.
Second.
Erica. Okay. Do you need all our signatures on this?
I think it's probably the same, it
Just
should have been kinda set up the same way as this
Just,
one here.
okay, the votes. All right, was
It might be.
anyone opposed? No one opposed, okay, so it's 7. Yeah, okay, I can deal with that one.
You forging my signature.
No. All right, you can fill in. All right, let's see, moving right along. Let's see. Town meeting, I just put that on there and see if there was any feedback from town meeting, any.
Actually, I was impressed with the shortness of the meeting.
Yeah.
Because I figured, mother of God, we're gonna be home, we'll be
Yeah,
getting out of
the
here at
next
11 or 11:30.
Yeah.
And for it to go the way that it went as quickly as it did. But the thing that got me was, okay, we're all sitting there and they got to the part of the warrant with the override, and then it was like Exodus. They all left. And I would have thought that with the marijuana stuff coming up after that, a lot of those parents would have stayed, but they didn't.
Nope.
They were done. Boom, they were out of there. That was
It was
close.
9 o'clock at night, so if we had kids in the childcare room,
Oh,
that
yeah, yeah.
was that was
That was the end of-
Oh, was that was the end of
that
it?
was, well, as soon as that, like, they had to, the staffing there,
Ah.
the school principal, Bathiendo, was staffing that room with volunteers.
Oh, wow.
From, my son was in there, as a
Oh,
middle
I-
schooler,
I
so
didn't know.
that was a big driver. There were like 40 to 50 kids. Brian went back there at one point during the, I think,
Wow.
the Plum Island discussion. He went back and looked at Beth and was like, God love you. Like, I don't know, like how they had them, they were all playing games in the center courtyard. And
I
they
see.
had that. So
Okay.
that was definitely a driver, was that you had, it was a school night. It was after 9 o'clock by the time we got to that point. So even though it felt early to us, if
It
you're
was-
a parent with little ones,
It was
at that point
nice
in
though,
time, you're
because
like,
I wasn't there till 11 o'clock and that
no, it was no, but that was definitely a concern. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people who had their kids in that room. My kids were
It's
there
not
too,
unusual
and I,
when there's that kind of a vote.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
but
And
at
there was
least
a
it's
small
not.
exodus after the Plum Island vote too. There were a
Yeah.
number of people that left right
Yeah.
after that.
There were people I talked to who were up in the bleachers who left because it was so hot.
Really?
Yeah, the
Really?
top of the bleachers.
I didn't think it was that hot in
It
there.
wasn't
that
down
room
on the
gets-
floor level.
I
When
know.
you get up to the top of the
I
bleachers,
have
it was
houses.
Yeah, oh no, I know that.
Yeah.
That
There
was
was a lot of
we have all that.
Yeah, I know, there was a lot of in the front. No, yeah, down. I had a sweater over my chair because I can't ever remember in that room. Like I either am like okay, or I'm either freezing or I'm boiling, and I'm like I couldn't remember.
But years ago, when our kids were little, they didn't have childcare.
Oh no, this was volunteer. That was
Yeah,
that
no,
was
but I mean-
for
It
that
was a
was
great-
specifically.
But that's a great
And-
thing to provide, so
Yeah.
that parents who wouldn't normally be able to come cause dad's working till midnight or whatever, and mom can't go, cause she's got nobody to watch
Yep.
the kids, so.
No, that message
It's a good
got
thing.
out to families, and I think a lot of people who had never been to a town meeting before
Yeah.
now see what they are. A lot of people, when they move here and they don't, this isn't
Right.
something they've
They're
grown
city
up with.
people.
If you're, yeah, I mean, if you've grown up in almost any city, you vote in an election, and that's
Right.
it. And your city
Right.
council, you might have to go in front of them. The whole idea of getting to a town meeting and how the voting works
Right.
is foreign. But once you get people coming once, the reason that there were so many people there was because those were the people who came out for the police station. And they came out, they got
Right.
to know each other. A lot of these people came together, especially the parents, came together around the playground bill.
Yeah.
That investment was made by generous donors and the sweat equity of lots of people. And those
Right.
people have really stuck together, and they know who they can count on, and they could say, hey, this is the night we need you there. And they knew
But-
how to do it.
But that's the way it should be.
And unfortunately, Salisbury last week, after the override failed,
Right.
they canceled their childcare for town meeting. Because they didn't understand that you still need to show up.
Right.
Even if you don't have education on the issues there, you have to show up. If there's one thing that I've learned in the last 7
Exactly.
years here, is that you have to know what's going on, you have to show up for all the meetings,
Right.
and make it a priority. My family, there's no sports that night, there's no,
There shouldn't be.
it just is the night that's,
Right.
and they have come. I think my kids were happy to sit in the childcare room this time. All had a card game
So
going.
I,
We had a
so
card
I
game
have to
going.
listen to these people
Again,
talk.
yeah, exactly,
Any,
like that's
any
the
other
thing.
town meeting feedback?
No, I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
I was impressed with the number of people there.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think our town meetings have gotten bigger every so often, even though
Yeah.
controversial items may be on the table, it seems like more people are showing up than that. Parking
I would
was at a
agree.
premium.
I would
mean,
agree.
there was kind of, it was difficult even if you were there on time to find a
Yeah.
place to park. I think people had somehow had long
Well-
walks to make.
Well, normally our meetings, our town meetings have, 80 or 100 people. If we're lucky, we have that
What
many.
did they say, 800?
It was 800? I thought it was 444.
Okay,
Probably more
you're
like
right. You're
Yeah,
right.
it
For-
was
for
at
I
the-
was-
that,
I
yeah.
Remember
was-
the 2/3 vote?
Yeah, that was
And
one
the
of them.
numbers on that.
The other
Which
thing
was
I know-
good.
I know that we shelved that voting mechanism.
Oh,
Oh, that was so.
I think that, the stand-up counting vote scenario leaves me queasy. Because we're always coming down to a small number of the votes deciding a two-thirds majority issue. I don't know how you're gonna do it.
Well, a lot of the towns, there's a system that everybody is handed like a little clicker.
Yes.
Yeah, we invited the guy last year, and
Right.
then people were incredibly
But,
rude to
but it's
him.
very expensive. But I've talked to a couple of other people from different towns, and they said, why don't we all get together and make our town meetings all different times and buy one set with X number of
It's a good idea.
pieces,
That is a
and
very
then
good idea.
That's a great
share them.
idea.
And actually, I think
between-
they are, Newbury, Raleigh, Salisbury are all different town
They,
meetings.
yeah,
They are all
they
different town meetings.
But I just
So it
don't
makes
have
sense.
confidence when they start counting and then
Yeah.
somebody says,
Particularly
I would agree
when
with
you
you.
get that set to the left of us. I know I moved friends out of that because that's
Yes.
supposed to be the out of town.
Right, and I've told people, yeah, you can
That's a
come if you
good
don't live in
idea.
town.
Yeah.
But I think maybe we could investigate it with Raleigh and Salisbury and
I
maybe
think
even
it's
Newburyport and see if we
definitely-
I
can
think
find.
Leslie was
Newburyport
Leslie
doesn't have a
behind
town
that
meeting.
initial?
Oh, no, that's right, they don't.
Yeah, that was, yeah,
It came from the town clerk.
But maybe
I think,
West Newbury, some of the towns, maybe if we
Actually, I
could.
turned around to her
purchase
when
it.
they were doing the two-thirds vote, and I says, we could use those clickers now.
Yeah,
Because
I
it would
think
be
we would
automatic,
definitely-
it would
Yeah,
automatically
because the crowd
record
is
it.
so large.
It speeds up the voting process.
I agree.
And it also,
It gives you confidence in the results of some
Maybe we should
within
look
the
at, maybe we should look into that.
and also I think it would allow people to, one of my friends, her husband stood in opposition to the Plum Island purchase, and she looked at him, she didn't realize until he sat back down, she's like, what the hell would you do that for? He's like, I can tell my opinion, and it's that thing, and she's like, no, what are you doing opposed to that? So, but she was like arguing with him, but there are some people who are very worried that what their neighbors will think if they stand up
That is
or
true.
sit down for one of them.
You're exactly
So I
right.
think, I think that it's definitely something that
So,
should be investigated
revisit,
as a
use some-
revisit,
We're
yeah.
gonna call them clickers.
I
Yeah.
think that's what they're called.
And
I think-
cooperative use.
cooperative
Is a
use.
good
Yes,
idea.
among different towns.
Yeah.
I think we should take the 10,000 for the cleanup and kill that and buy a voting.
I have a friend who's a Rockport selectman, and they were going to buy them, but they were so expensive, I don't think that they did. But they were trying to find a way to share them with other towns, so
Yeah.
that, share the purchase, so that,
Well, yeah, you
Takes
We
that
buy them
drama out of
and
it.
then rent them out.
We rent them out. yeah.
exactly.
But it takes that little drama out of the standing.
Yeah.
And people look at each other across the room.
Some people won't-
That they
Some
ever get
people
the
won't
votes,
vote
right?
because,
Yeah.
because, just like you said, because they don't want anybody to see how they're voting.
I think you're right.
And it's tamper proof.
Yes. Once you click it, yes or
Unless
no.
somebody writes some algorithm or something to get it, but no.
I don't think we can do that.
No, it's not, it's closed system.
None of us could do
Yeah, it's
that.
closed system, so.
Maybe some
yeah.
kid
But
could
no, I
do
think
it.
that that's a, I
Anything else?
definitely think that would be
I've
a
written that
huge.
down because I thought I did, like, you saw me turn
You know what?
around. And I said to Leslie, we could use those clickers because they were having some issues.
I'll,
Oh, yeah,
I'll
the
email-
moderator said, sit down, stand up.
Oh yeah, he decided to switch it up. I'm like, oh good God, don't, no, we're all.
you know what?
You gotta
I'll-
be standing to
I'll
be
email
counted
my
as
friend
a-
Don Campbell from Rockport
Yeah.
and see if they bought them or if they're going to buy them or, you know, maybe we can work something out.
I mean, there was some enthusiasm on the part of, I know, Tracy and Leslie for doing
We
it.
really thought they were a great idea.
But they were
No,
very
no.
expensive, I believe.
Yeah, and
But
they
if we
didn't
could
bring
split
enough
them.
for.
Yeah.
That was part
That
of it.
was-
If
yeah,
it
it
had
was
been
a big
enough, I
night.
think we might have moved forward.
Yes.
Yeah, but and then people were so
Let me
rude
find
to the
out
guy.
from the,
Oh, that was terrible.
It was absolutely. I was embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, yeah.
It was a contentious night. Anything other feedback on this most recent town meetings?
I would just say I was pleased overall. There was some contention there, but overall I felt it was a positive night. It felt like a good step forward and a real community building night.
even though some people are kind of cranky about the way the budget was presented as bottom line,
Yeah.
I think it was better because it forces people to learn to actually read the stuff that was in the back of it.
Yep.
And if they had a problem with it, speak up. But otherwise, the regulars who normally hold everything,
And if we stay
Didn't
with
do
it,
it.
people will get used to it.
Yeah.
I think it was a very positive thing to do.
I heard positive feedback on the length of our presentation.
Yes,
Sure.
So did
we
I.
were short and sweet and just
keep it simple.
play the hits. Give
The
the people what they
simple
want.
One, people were
Yep.
able to understand it,
Yep,
and they said, you know, when you used to do figures, we couldn't read them anyway from the
Right,
side.
exactly. There's,
right.
So that was great.
Yes, no,
Good job.
I think it was probably one of the better town meetings I've ever attended.
A lot of participation.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, I agree.
Okay, on to agenda item 6 on page 12. I think everyone may have gotten a copy of the revised budget. It should be, there's a copy in the packet. And I direct you mostly to where the arrow is, if it showed up on your sheet. Which is operating assessment. And their new revised budget provides, the assessment to Newbury is increased, and the assessment is $464,258, 5.39% increase. As a result of our town meeting and the override vote, we voted in total 659,000. So we have approved more than enough
Oh, okay.
to
our
cover,
budget, yeah.
to cover the Triton increase
Good.
as it stands now. And
Good.
this is clearly still dependent on at least one other town approving their assessment.
Yeah. I had
So
somebody
Have
from
dates been
Rowley.
set for new town meetings?
It's a,
No, yeah.
There's,
June, I
yes,
think,
Salisbury has set a town
Salisbury.
meeting for June 30th, it's a Saturday, but someone wants to have some fun, their Board of Selectmen meeting was last night, and Neil Harrington, when he left the school committee meeting last week, people were under the impression that he was gonna propose a new lower override number to cover their about $600,000 here of their assessment.
627, yeah.
He did not. He actually went back and said that he did not want to recommend that, was not going in there to recommend that, and the inevitable outcome last night was that they decided not to do anything. So there is still a town meeting set.
This is Rowley.
This was Salisbury. They decided that they would wait to hear from Rowley,
Okay.
to see what
I-
Rowley does.
I had a gentleman from
You-
Rowley.
Just
So-
a point of clarification, if no action is taken, the budget is automatically.
yeah.
It's automatically approved. So, but they were adamant that in order for this number to, for them to pay for this, that they would be laying people off within the town government, and that
Okay. So
they
that's
think that
also-
Triton has made them and to do that.
I don't know about Raleigh, I don't know what the status is.
I'm sorry, I
I
didn't
know.
understand what you said. It said they were,
Salisbury's tone was very much, the district wants, their use of language wasn't the district needs are this amount of money, it's the district wants this amount of money, and they haven't understood that we need deeper cuts. That was the official,
they think the district should be cutting.
the cuts were not deep enough. Bringing it down by 600,000 was not enough. It didn't cut any teachers. It cut instructional assistants, but did not cut any teachers. It starts at about minute 49 of their meeting. If you want to watch it, it's online.
Did everybody get a copy of the, I think the superintendent sent it to all town.
It went to all parents, I know. I think we all got this, I think, in the mail. in the
They
email.
listed what the reductions were, and other reductions that they did review that weren't taken. So
This
the
is-
total reductions were
This is what the top in yellow is what they actually, where the reductions came
Oh.
from, and these are others
Yeah,
that
it
they
was,
have
it was
not
something that
recommended.
Brian sent out.
Yeah,
It looked like everybody was included
yeah.
when he sent it out.
Yeah.
So
I think
anyway,
their line item appropriation that they passed was only 78, and based on what they said last night, if I got it right, the number that they passed at town meeting was only $78,000 more than what they appropriated last year. So they, instead of like what we did where we put like 300 and put 350, they put 78 in their line item, and they put 800,000 on the override, thereby,
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that.
so they didn't even, it doesn't look like, from what I could see
what
on
they're
the,
normally.
what they would have put in as a normal increase, that would have been somewhere,
Okay.
Question, for the town of Newbury, we did pass the override.
Yeah.
Correct.
Now, but the override is in excess of what our budget.
It's fine.
Do we have the opinion that we can use whatever the override calls for other things, or do we have to spend the entire override?
You don't have to spend the entire override, no.
What is the recommendation?
It's a
the town-
general, basically a general override.
It was a specific
But it
override.
becomes
No,
general.
it's
No.
Override.
no,
But it
it's,
was specifically for the Triton budget.
the first year it has to,
First year.
first year it gets used for that,
So
and
it
then,
would sit,
Well, it's an override, I understand,
be unused.
but the idea that you say that we passed, say, 650, we're only getting
we
assessed,
passed 359.
Yeah.
we passed 359 and we're getting assessed, what, 464?
Yeah,
So ours, we didn't pass enough for,
no, we did,
Yes, we did.
because we appropriated 300 of the
Let's-
difference was in the line item in the
We
operating
we
budget.
appropriated a
Okay,
total
great.
of 659,000.
okay, that's what I'm saying.
Of which we only need 464. So there, technically, we have unused revenue source. Is that
Excess levy
excess
capacity.
levy capacity?
Sure.
Yes, yeah. So it's an excess.
In this fiscal year, what are we gonna do with that excess capacity?
We can't do anything with it right now because there's no action to take regarding that excess at the moment, nothing.
No, but it would be, if something come up like, we could use it for other things?
That would
It's-
require somebody's legal opinion, but I don't think so, that's my sense.
We couldn't do it without a vote,
We can't do anything without a
a
vote.
vote of town meeting,
Well,
I don't
it's
think.
appropriated,
It's appropriate, but we can't,
It's only
it would only for a
appropriated
raise
for
for the school, so
so
it would need to transfer
I
out
don't think,
and.
my opinion is that you can't do anything with it this year.
And
But can we let it ride until next year?
Of course, it's already there.
It's already there.
It's
Okay.
there forever. It's there forever now. That's what it does.
and
It's
can be
forever.
used for anything next year.
Next year.
Yeah, and I think the wise thing to
To
do.
do is earmark,
Quite honestly.
look at what we're looking at
Yeah.
5%,
If
see
the
what that
Triton-
number
if
is,
the
and
Triton
budget that
budget-
5%.
If the Triton budget, for whatever reason, doesn't pass at all, and we don't even have to use any of it, it's there to be used in the future. So I think it would behoove us not to think about going elsewhere.
No, I mean,
Because we'll be in trouble.
I just
the way
wondered,
we
I've
were
heard
when we-
people's opinions saying,
Yeah.
well, we voted for override, which is true.
Yeah.
And it was basically for the Triton budget amount, we used that argument for it. I mean, I'm not saying logistically, but now if the budget gets recast and it's not needed, the thing is that we will still assess the town for that amount of money on their taxes.
That's a good question.
Is whether or not we have to assess the full amount. We do. Okay. That's what I assume.
Yeah.
So
So
the
the
excess
excess
would then go
levy.
into free cash.
Excess.
at
The
end of this
excess will
fiscal year.
just, at the
Would
end
end
of
up
the
at-
year, or
Probably
unless there was a
free cash.
special town meeting to
Ultimately,
reappropriate it.
Be a part of your new starting point for fiscal 20. So,
But I think the thing be looking ahead to next year would be that instead of just pacing our, the number, instead of just looking at our final from this year and budgeting our new growth plus the 2.5% together and saying that's what Newbury can afford, we then next year know that we can budget, we need to take into consideration the override that went towards it, and also the fact that the needs that are in the Triton budget aren't gonna change, or they're not gonna change and go down next year.
that's
We
right.
need to be anticipating, just like the other towns need to be anticipating that you can't ask for they're not gonna be able to keep their costs at going up by 2%.
Well, I mean, the other thing is the enrollment factor still is a big issue for them to deal with. And I don't think they've effectively dealt with the enrollment going down and therefore the staffing level concurrently being affected by enrollment. And I know that, like you say, that, well, you would like to keep the student-teacher ratios and everything else properly defined and all the benefits, that's fine. But, you're seeing such a drop precipitously in enrollment, and it doesn't seem like it's gonna go any higher, it's gonna go low.
They're not adding any teachers.
No, I understand, but they're not adding any students either. The students are
But
going
even-
down.
I've said this before, I'll say it again, because I've worked with student enrollment for years. It is simply one measure, and not a very good one, of the cost of education. It is not a very good measure of the cost of education. But that's how the state chooses.
Well, I mean, I
So there's a perception that has to be addressed by Triton
correct.
about what the costs are and how they are related to the total education of all of the kids that they have. If you look at the per pupil cost of a place like Wellesley or Winthrop or Weston, they're bordering $20,000. If Triton had $20,000 per kid, that would be, but the cost of educating, the programming cost for educating a kid in Weston is probably not as much as the programming costs that need to be provided for the kids in Triton, quite frankly, because their needs are very different. I'm just trying to,
I understand the,
You know what I'm saying.
I understand your point, but I'm saying the perceived issue is declining enrollment.
yeah, I understand, and they gotta address it, I
And the
agree with
fact of the
that.
matter is, you can't jump 5.6%. I think the number on the budget this year, what is it, 5.48 net?
Yeah.
Net operating assessment's gone to 5.5%.
Yeah.
And then you could say, fine, but then you're looking at next year, it shouldn't, it should be much less than that, I would suspect.
No.
I wouldn't.
Why not?
For the
If you
reasons
took
I
if you
just
took
said.
one kid out of every class in Newbury Elementary School, that would be a massive drop in enrollment. But it would not give you the capacity to drop a single teacher, because you would still have 20-some kids in every class. You would not if you dropped 20 kids in 3rd grade, okay, maybe you could drop a teacher then. But that decline in enrollment isn't going to be centered in one spot like that. So it doesn't allow you to drop costs out, drop anything like that. And people may need to understand that, but that's not for Triton to say they are dealing with that.
I think
And
need
you're
to
also your hard
understand that.
costs of running the school buildings themselves. Those are the cost of the 3 buildings, the fixed costs that are go aside with it. Also, the increases in things that are outside of the state transportation budget. We have to move the same amount of people. If it's down by 10 or 20 students, we're still moving the same amount of roads. And you have to cover that in the same number of buses. And so those costs, the state not reimbursing us at 100% is a first place. So fighting that fight is one. is fighting it at the state level. But the declining enrollment numbers is not just an issue for Triton, it is an issue for Newburyport, it's an issue for everywhere in this part of Massachusetts, because there's not enough birth rate and not enough new families moving in, because people are aging in place and that's not growing. So it's a different thing, our communities might
I
be
think
growing.
Larry's bottom line may be the need for, we've all shared our opinions around why the district needs to be clear
They need,
in explaining why these
Right.
costs
The
are
messaging.
what they are regardless of the enrollment. And Larry, to support your point here, Triton could lose, and they did, 100 kids, say, to choice, to choice. And they lose $5,000 for each one of those kids. They don't save probably 10 grand,
No.
because they're not, and that's the point he's
But I
making.
think the school choice issue,
That's done with.
yeah, but still.
But it's the same idea.
but
It could be, it could be resurfaced.
we've just worked to
Yeah.
effectively not make this a district to move into.
Yeah, what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that becomes a major issue, because at one point in time, they were significantly low. They were the bottom of school choice out.
Oh, yeah.
They were the top school choice out
Yeah.
district.
Oh, yeah.
And
They
we've
were.
known that surrounding towns have campaigned to bring their students into their schools, whether it be Newburyport, Ipswich, or whatever. They've actually gone after students, and the administration needs to be sensitive to keeping.
That's pretty much
That's not,
leveled off.
that's not,
Most of that
most
stuff
of the
is
places,
done.
there's more
I mean, there's
demand
still-
for
there's
choice
still
than
some.
there is. The school districts that people want to choice into, there's not spots to choice into.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a moneymaker for them. It's not a moneymaker for us, but
Right.
it's
Anyway.
one of the reasons people don't choice into Newburyport, is
Again,
because they
Larry, I
can't
think that's a message.
get in.
So the bottom line is, we will not know until the end of the month as to where we stand.
Yeah.
If Rowley passes it before the end of the month, we know where we stand.
Right.
If nobody does anything,
I don't
Then
think
it passes.
Raleigh doesn't seem to, and I think Salisbury is putting all the pressure on Raleigh to make the call.
right,
If they don't make the call, they're not gonna go along with it, and so Triton is gonna have to go back to recasting another budget.
Yes.
I would agree.
Okay. Anything else to be said on that? There's no action, it's just so we all understand where we're
watching.
at mostly.
where everybody else falls.
Page 13 is another just notification, the district communication committee meeting will be on Thursday, the 24th. I am going to try to go.
When,
This
Mom.
Thursday, the 24th. It's 2 days.
Day after tomorrow. I don't know, I was gotta work for that, the days, I don't know what day it is.
Larry,
That should be- that should
they
be
are
fun
going to, the landlord tenant working group, we don't need to go over that, because Larry already did a very good job of explaining.
Well, that's been taken off the table because of Raleigh's decision to build a Pine Grove school, so that they're gonna hang on to that, and we're gonna hang on to ours, and then Salisbury will
Yeah,
get,
well,
will
but
get
they-
this, they'll get
You,
this.
you went through the agreement, which included it. Yeah.
I think that the one thing with the district communication meeting agenda is this concept of trying to come up with a new funding formula.
That's the second item, yeah. But I think all three towns essentially are in agreement on the landlord.
Yes, they
And
are.
everybody said that they wouldn't move ahead with the
Right.
assessment until.
Right. And now they want to, the second item is the alternative assessment, and they want to put together a work group to address that.
Now, as I understand, so just educate me, that they've surveyed all the other towns around as to how they fund it, more or less, is that the consensus, and they're trying to come up with a different assessment formula, different from what we have now?
I don't know how much has gone on. I think that would be the task of the working group, to take what they do have and to continue to do that. There's a variety of different formats for assessment. I mean, we're involved in a different assessment for Whittier. We're involved in a different assessment for Essex Agricultural and Technical, and we're involved for a different assessment for Triton. All three assess differently.
Correct.
And there is a working
So-
group of
I think
Well, the
Marissa,
The
Regional
bottom-
districts.
Well, the bottom line of the alternative assessment formulation from Newbury's perspective is that they want us to pay more money. They being the other two towns who basically think that we're getting off lightly in our assessment because of enrollment.
That may be
I have
what's
to throw this out
driving them.
because I got questioned by a Raleigh, lifetime Raleigh resident. He said, why does Newbury pay so much less than Raleigh is?
Correct.
Because we don't have the number of students that
That's
you
part of
have.
it.
That's part of
And
it.
I said,
Used to
and I
be
said,
the
and
other
on
way- used to be the
top
other
of
way
it,
around.
I said, seriously, we've lost all the taxes over all these years since Triton was built on that property. That was privately owned property before it was turned into a high school. I said, who provides ambulance coverage, fire coverage, police coverage? We do.
We've gone on
Yeah.
through that.
But I was
My
talking,
point on-
explaining to this gentleman
My point
about it.
of when we get to that alternative funding formula, I think somewhat of a tax-based understanding should be employed. Raleigh has a tremendous amount of businesses and also major facilities in their community, and how they
Exactly.
go, I mean, we don't
Way
have,
more than we do.
we don't have it. We don't have any
Right.
of any significance. Salisbury also has had tremendous growth in their property and their
Yeah.
living accommodations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't feel that we have to, defend us, other fact, let's look at, not what we pay, but what is our tax base going to support. That's why the formula, because I've looked at it closely, is essentially driving them crazy, is the fact that it takes into consideration the valuation of their property, such as Raleigh may not have as many homes, but they have more than adequate
Exactly.
amount of commercial space.
Right.
We have none. And so you have to balance that out, because all they're interested, in my humble opinion, is to say, we paying too much, Newbury's getting off, and we need to have them pay more.
The group needs to step back and look at what is the fairest way to do this. And
Right.
that's really what needs to happen. And I'm not sure they're ready to do that, but it's gonna take
I would
time.
agree.
Not in my opinion.
The problem
Probably not in our
with that
lifetime.
discussion is everybody has a different opinion of what's fair.
Oh, I understand.
Exactly.
I understand, but that's
Yeah,
why
but
you need to meet
our
and work
opinion
through it.
counts, there's
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah,
Problem with that
that's
discussion
what
is
I'm
nobody's
saying.
paying enough.
That's right, that's
Exactly.
it, you know,
That's,
so.
Well, who knows, maybe the legislature will have.
But anyway, that will be,
epiphany.
Yeah, I don't, it's fine.
I'll put money on this formula getting fixed before the state formula gets fixed. I'll run a martini on that.
Actually, that's a good question. Did
It is
did
the state
Brian,
formula.
did Triton get anything more from the state?
well,
Yeah, nothing's,
anticipating.
They're working on it.
This
There's
is-
no
this
budget
is
yet.
There were
part of the
votes today, were
risk.
there not?
I don't
I
know.
don't think the whole budget's been
I
totally.
mean, that's part of the
No,
risk
it
of
hasn't been
even the
signed,
budget they
so
have
it's not.
proposed.
I thought I'd seen something about it
In
in the
answer to
governor's desk,
Frank's
but I didn't go
question-
back to look.
Yeah.
There's an assumption of increased revenue in the amount
Oh,
of
yeah.
$175,000.
Just to.
Is that for transportation or?
It's for,
Enrollment?
chapter 70 and 85% transportation reimbursement.
No, that's right.
Let me put it in context. In 2006, when I joined the FinCom, that was the first committee meeting I was involved in. It was a 3-town discussion
Yeah.
of essentially going and changing the formula. And at that point in time, Salisbury and Raleigh adamant and fought like hell to take the state formula as the de facto standard assessment. It wasn't Newbury's decision to go that way.
Right.
We were fine. They also said that the superintendent was doing this formula
Yeah.
shifting, but when they came to that meeting, it was, that we will go with the state formula. Therefore, to give them back some other alternative, because they don't like it, because I don't think is an appropriate position to be in. I would say, that's what you wanted, that's what you fought for, and that's what you got in that 2006 new cast of the intermunicipal agreement.
Yeah,
That we
that's-
would
Yeah.
use the state formula.
That's a great point, Larry. That's almost irrefutable because
Wow.
they voted for it.
Yes,
They-
at one time.
Yeah, oh
No,
yeah.
but so
And that
what?
was-
That was
that
the
was-
crucial time, 2006.
There may
You
be
kidding
other
me?
crucial times. But what that did, the reason they voted for it, and Larry knows, is because at the time, the state formula benefited them.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Now, the
It's
state
benefiting
formula,
us.
because of our circumstance, tends to benefit us. That won't happen forever.
Yeah,
Yeah, it will.
So,
There was
you need to come up with
You're
an
right.
assessment that's going to work and to last over time, regardless of all this
there was,
manipulation.
in the state
Because you
formula.
can create your own assessment formula. You do not have to use the state.
No.
yeah, well,
State
frankly, there was a
formula.
superintendent at the time was creating the zone assessment formula.
Yeah, and so we'll blame the superintendent, but he's gone.
What happened was is that the state says you have to pay so much money for education. If you weren't paying that amount of money, and when you hit the 85th percentile of your assessment, then you were adequately funding your school from a town point of view. We were at 85 much sooner than Salisbury and
Yes,
Rowley.
exactly.
And so every year they would play catch up
Yeah.
by paying additional percentages
good way to
over and
put it.
above to
Right.
get to the 85. And for many years, that's what they benefit from. Now that now the enrollment component part is the kicker, is that's hurting them deeply.
It's
And
both things still.
yeah, and you go to look at Salisbury, they have de facto changed their town from a transient wintertime location to many, many apartments and complexes, and so they have much more real estate base than they have.
Exactly, and more kids
Yeah.
in the school.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Okay,
I think we should.
anything else? Any other discussion on that? Any other business? Any other business?
Did we have next date for next meeting?
Not
No,
yet.
not yet. That's the next one, Marshall.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're jumping the gun.
Well, no other business. Might as well jump to the gun.
We do need to, for those folks, let's see, I think I mentioned this a couple of meetings ago, your term,
I don't remember. I have no
yes,
idea.
it is. You, Frank, Erica, and I are up for, yes, and what I've suggested is that, because we're out of cycle, there should not be 4 people being appointed.
No.
Larry,
No,
your
no,
term
it's
wasn't up until another year from
7.
now.
Correct.
No,
So-
7, not 4 out of 7 in 1 year.
Yeah, 4 people, yes, 4 people that was the mistake that was made back a few years ago. So what I'm going to do is ask to be reappointed simply for 1 year. That's what but you need to let Tracy know or somebody know if you want to be, number one, if you want to be reappointed, that's really what you have to do or not, so. Because that comes up, yeah, it comes up, I got a note from Leslie, she's the one that keeps track of that.
Yeah.
So you need to do that, probably sometime fairly soon before the next selectmen's meeting, which is probably, which is 2 weeks, I guess. Or at least before the last selectmen's meeting of the month. I'm not sure when they do it, but if they remember to do it. But Ellen has been remembering to do it at the meetings for them, so, anyway.
It's a good thing somebody knows.
You can, anyone wanna share whatever they wanna share.
So should that decision go to Tracy or to the Board of Selectmen?
Well,
I don't-
through Tracy to the
If you
board.
give it to
Okay.
Tracy, then she'll
Yeah,
go bring it to
yeah,
the select.
yeah, so, anyway.
I've already drafted my letter, and I am not seeking reappointment.
Neither me, neither am I.
Yeah. After 7 years, I feel like I really, really enjoyed this, but I just took a full-time job and commute to Boston. And my
Yep.
family needs me, and
What is wrong with you commuting to
I'm not gonna be
Boston?
commuting every day, but I do have to be in Boston a little bit more, and I need to, I will definitely, I've put some feelers out to see if I can find people who are interested, and I will definitely share what I've learned. I've learned a ton from this group, and I'm really proud of the work we've done together over the last few years, so it was not an easy decision, but I didn't know what was up until about 2 weeks ago, and the thought of thinking ahead 3 more years, I don't feel right making that commitment to the town at this point in time.
You can't, your kids are reasonably young. They need mom.
In about 4 years, I'm gonna do that.
No,
So
4 years,
that's
no.
why-
So, yeah, but no, so I've definitely
Well, you've done a
enjoyed
great
this.
job.
Yes, yeah,
Congratulations on the job.
yeah,
Thank you.
yes.
So, yeah, we're-
Frank, are you announcing this as well? Did I hear you say something?
Well, no, I've already told you that.
I know, but I haven't told everybody else.
Oh my God.
Too much
I
to
guess
do.
we need to form an alumni association.
What it tells me is,
Cause I can do
we're
things
gonna have to have a
That's the
hell
whole
of a
thing.
party
We
with
would
it.
vote, so we
Can't
can-
say goodbye to these guys.
We'll show up at a meeting.
Even Larry, it was only gonna be you.
Right.
We weren't even gonna have a party for you. Now we're gonna have a party.
Oh, yeah, well, I think, you know, coming from a graduation, you always get a pitch from the alumni association.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we should,
Yeah, but that comes with a request for money.
well, you know,
That's right.
you'll always get a request for money, but I think the alumni association input would be the way to go.
So we will definitely have one more meeting before the end of this fiscal year, probably because we'll need it. But I'm not sure we'll do it, well, let me figure out what's the best.
But please
Well-
don't do it the week of June 23rd.
I-
That's the music
yeah.
festival.
Oh, you're crazy. Oh, yeah, that week leading up to
We're
it.
busy,
I'm in
we're
Boston
busy.
that week leading up to it. I'm 3 days I have to be there, so.
Although we could,
All those paid
that's right, we don't
outfits.
absolutely need a meeting to deal with year-end stuff. We can do it, we could do it with the, after July 1st.
Correct.
Up until-
I've got until the 15th.
So we may do it, what's
So
our
we're
our
looking for
regular
people.
what's our regular meeting date would be
I don't know.
the first
I
Tuesday
might
of the month.
have, I might have.
First Tuesday of July,
No, of June,
First Tuesday of
which
June.
is soon.
that would be the 5th.
I'd love to get some more young people.
That's, I'm trying, and
Ah,
I've
yeah.
definitely offered up my consulting. I will pass along all of the presentations
We may
and
just have our
everything that
meeting
I've
at the regular
done, and
June 5th
I'd be
date.
happy to help put those together
Everybody's good.
in the future too, just
June 5th,
as a consultant.
June 5th is
I
the
may,
first
I may be coming
Tuesday.
straight off the Little League field if that doesn't matter.
June 5th,
Ew.
Tuesday. That's our normal meeting night,
Yeah.
so let's do it then. That's 2 weeks from now, I think.
It's Denmark Day.
Oh, gee.
Oh, and I'll be at softball too.
It'll be a very short meeting. Plan on a short meeting, I hope. Tell Tracy.
Unless we cancel
I
it
think
during.
Tracy's gone. I think she's away.
What?
I think Tracy's away.
June 5th?
I do.
Where's she going, the beach?
No,
That might be good.
she's cruising.
Oh, cruising. Oh, okay. Well, we'll just send her the bill for the party.
Doesn't it come out of our,
Okay, to.
We have some balances in the account.
our
You're not
party,
opening
yeah?
expenditure.
I know. They do it at the federal level, I think, right? Why are we any different? All right, we've done that. Anything else? Thank you all. Move for adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you all.
This is what I did. I just did.
Oh,
I just,
yes.
you okay with that?
Company
Yes.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to show you.
Working
so-
with the same
Right,
company.
that's
Okay?
right.
Yes.
Oh, they brought you from a consultant?
They, yeah, I got, promoted, moved to full-time, moving into the financial services division. Market research primarily, agency type stuff, so. They're basically doing the
Do we
same
all
job.
need
same
to?
job.
No,
Yeah, something like that.
Good.
I think you have to sign a couple pages on that one.
But no, I'm,
On this
it's-
one?
Yeah.
It's, I fell into doing this 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've moved up from just being like consultant.
So
A lot of
what-
what I do is exactly the same as what I've done there.
Yeah, just that
Just
one.
different industries, different.
Whereabouts in Boston?
They're in the Seaport, they're right
Yeah.
across the channel from the Children's Museum.
Okay.
And that area
You
is
got any
booming.
deals on Honda,
There's
CVRs,
on
whatever they're called?
CRV stuff.
CRV.
So
And
there's
not long.
Sunday, Sunday's,
least, I'm
I
thinking
pretty much
about
worked it out that I only have to
I've
drive
had
probably,
a
I
truck
come in
for
2 days a
17
week.
years.
Truck? I
Yeah.
can drive 2 days a week.
See,
My son
you
said,
get a parking spot.
you can get a new one every 3 years at least.
Yes.